Next session we have on Agentic-Al for SRE and DevOps by Mr. Shiv Pratap Singh, co-founder and head product engineering at Nudgebee. Can we have a big round of applause for Mr. Shiv Pratap? Shiv Pratap Singh is the co-founder of Nudgebee and a platform engineer at heart. He has over a decade of experience in architecting and scaling robust infrastructure for startups and enterprises. With a proven ability to deliver high-performance, reliable platforms that directly contribute to business growth and innovation, he is passionate about continuing learning and fostering knowledge sharing within the community. Over to you, sir.
Hey everyone, while he's setting up my laptop, right? So that guy you look here doesn't look like me exactly. You can also find some holy color in my white hair, so that is okay. Okay, so the talk is basically around how you can use AI assistant at a SRE and DevOps level, right? Just give me a second. AI day-to-day basis, like, I mean, from your SRE or DevOps related work. Okay, so a lot of application developers, they use AI. From example, they use GitHub Copilot, right, to basically help them solving code-related issues, right? But what we have observed during on SRE and DevOps space, right, you don't have a similar kind of tool. You can definitely use AI to generate a, let's say, a script, right, or generate a automation, but that there's no tool which basically continuously watches workloads that, okay, how they are performing, what kind of issues there is happening, and they can go ahead and suggest you a code fix for that, right? Okay, I have observed this log issue, and this is, here you go and have a code fix for that, right? Or I have observed this automation where your workload is spiking. Now this is a Helm chart fix which you can go ahead and apply that, right? So that is what Nudgebee trying to do. It is trying to basically, as a AI assistant for SRE and DevOps team members, where it basically takes care of a lot of these mundane tasks, where it continuously watches for your workloads, continuously watches for your any errors which are happening at a code level, right? And then give you a suggestion around like how to fix that. And if you trust enough the AI assistant, you can configure it to go ahead and then do those changes as well, right? So that is what comes with like Nudgebee. And then the general talk is about like, okay, what kind of feature it has, what all the our learnings are while building this kind of platform, how we incorporated AI into our system, and then trying to solve those problems through AI challenges, etc., right? Okay, so till then, anyone, any experience on using AI meanwhile? He's still setting up that, yeah. Ah, nice. Uh-huh. Cool.
Going through logs based on natural language,
Uh-huh.
troubleshooting Kubernetes related
That's
issues.
pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
So what we do,
And also, like the way you said, like it will suggest what should be needed to be fixed for Helm chart, or if any bugs in the production, then how is it going to auto fix it? So
Right.
I'm currently working on similar product for our in-house projects.
So are you planning to kind of productize it, or is it like still targeted for your in-house?
It's just for internal users because we have a very big SRE team. So we want to distribute a few workloads to AI and few would be for the real
And
humans.
that is kind of general industry trend, right? Where people are started adding AI into a lot of their day-to-day work in terms of like DevOps, SRE, some part. I've heard a company which is trying to do a HR-specific AI implementation, right? So they are kind of moving AI into all of those business domains, right? So anyway, so how was your experience in terms of like implementing it? Did you find any challenges, any kind of problems where it gets stuck?
I don't see any challenge so far because I'm just defining agents for a specific task and then managing a state through lang graphs.
Oh, okay.
And so I am using kind of hybrid agentic AI frameworks with lang graph and autogen. Autogen just for code generation related stuff. And lang graph to manage workflows, going back and forth, storing in memory, creating checkpointers.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
so
So we also do a similar stuff in terms of ours. We have our own framework to basically build those AI agents.
okay,
And then we also use our own fine-tuned model, which are like very specialized in the task which we are doing, right? For example, task in terms of generating different queries, different commands, etc. So it's a similar approach. It's just the model layer which we have our own model layer which we are trying to use, but
so
almost
so
similar
you are
approach.
not using OpenAI or something like that.
No, we are not. So challenge is in the certain cases is, for example, a lot of customers which we are targeting, right? Uh, in that case, it is basically a customer data which you can't just send to OpenAI, right? You want basically an environment which is controlled by you, right?
Yeah.
So that is where we use our own model, unless until customer has, let's say, is using Microsoft OpenAI variation, right? In that cases, we try to plug into that, but other than it is basically our own model which we are trying to hit.
So isn't it a challenge for you to train your own LLM model because you require enormous millions of data?
Not really. So it's not a training a model. It is basically a fine tuning a model, right?
Okay,
So we use basically two different variation of model. One is a Llama 70B, which is a open source model,
correct.
right? Anyone can go ahead and use it. It is not very huge model, but it is still very reasonable in terms of doing a reasoning, right? And then the second one is a Microsoft fee-based model, which is around 8 billion, and that is what we basically do a fine-tuning on, right? So that way it is not very huge model, and they don't cost you a lot, right? And also, you can host Llama on, let's say, AWS Bedrock, right? Which basically doesn't train on your data. They basically give you that guarantee, right? So you can host your model into Bedrock and then do a per API based pricing, right? So that basically
So
makes it a cheaper.
so is it safe to use open source model for this kind
It
of
is.
premium product?
It is.
Because we are using enterprise version of OpenAI, so it is
That
not training with our data.
right. So, but in our case, we are using open source. We are controlling which part, like how it needs to respond
But
through the fine
but at
tuning
least
and all.
it will capture your data to train that particular model.
But that is the model which is basically deployed by us, right? We
Okay,
are
okay,
hitting it. We are just retraining it and all, right? So that control process is basically at our end.
okay, fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
looking
But
forward to your presentation.
yeah, okay. Team. So, but where is the laptop then? General purpose platform which sits on top of observability and goes beyond observability in terms of like how you can resolve a particular issue, right? Automate that, etc. And during our journey, we basically then went ahead and started implementing AI on top of it, right? So we started with a general observability-based platform, giving insights into logs, traces, etc. Next slide, or how can I control it from here? Okay. So this is the micro trend when we are talking to different people, right? This is the trend which we have observed in terms of like there are going to be more application which is going to be developed, right? Because people are using a lot of different tools like Copilot, or they are using a cursor of the word, right? Where you can develop 3x more application with the same team. I mean, look into our team, right? Which is basically a 7-member team who has built this complete platform at a backend level, right? And we do use a lot of these tools in terms of simplifying certain things, right? You still need a very good understanding of underlying technology, what you need to ask a question and all. But a lot of these tools are basically simplifying the development process, right? That means they are going to be same number of people building lot many things, right? And no one is going to increase the SRE team's budget, right? You still are going to have a same number of SRE team. Now they have to support 3x more application than what they were previously supporting, right? Then a lot of applications are moving towards Kubernetes or cloud native kind of architecture, right? Even within your team, right, there will be a lot of migration projects which are happening, right, where you are migrating your monolith application to your microservices architecture, either moving to Kubernetes or moving to ECS or similar, but now you are kind of splitting your application. So from a team perspective, previously you had a one application which you need to manage. Now you have a 10 applications which you have to manage from a SRE team, right? And then looking into and troubleshooting between those 10 applications, right? Which application is failing, how much memory allocation that needs to be, where requests are coming, etc. Right? So your overall workload is kind of going to increase over the period of time, right? And then if you read news, right, you have seen like a lot of big players like Google, AWS, etc., they are doing heavy investment on the data center, right? Because of the expectation in terms of number of applications which are coming in, number of AI-related application or the GPUs they have to invest, right? So this is a general micro trend which we have observed in the current period of timeline, right? Can you please shift next? I can come there as well. Okay. So now that means because every application, there is a more application, everything is moving to cloud native, right? What the challenge is that overall troubleshooting has increased in our opinion, right? What that means is previously you have to look into a single application. Now you have to trace back your 10 different application to a single API call, right? And then identify which one is failing, why it was failing, and then fix it back, right? Most of the applications are over provisioned, and these are the numbers from the Gartners of the world, right? That 70% of the applications are over provisioned by 50%, right? And the reason simply developers don't really know like how much their workloads are going to take in terms of production, how much they can take, right? So they go with the over provisioning, and no one really comes back and check like this over provisioning, they do need to increase it, they need to decrease it. Only time you do is like when your application went out of memory, right? You go ahead and then blindly increase the memory rather than kind of looking into the root cause, why that happened, when that happened, etc., right? And the third one is general shortage of cloud DevOps and SRE experts, right? So even if, because the previous trends, like there is going to be huge number of new applications, the SRE teams are not going to have basically double the number of DevOps engineer or SRE members in your team, right? They are going to be exactly same, right? So that is where we come up with a solution called Nudgebee, right? Which, can you please go next? So Nudgebee tries to solve basically these three problems. One is to reduce a troubleshooting time, which is basically taken for a particular problem to solve, right? And to troubleshoot, we basically use AI agents and LLMs. So what happens is we collect all the relevant information which is required to debug a particular issue. Then we use LLMs to basically identify the root cause for that. And then finally, give you a root cause analysis that, okay, this is why the reason this particular issue has happened. Second aspect is a cost agent, which continuously watches a Kubernetes cluster and then gives you insight in terms of, okay, these are the workloads which are having a spiky behavior. There you need to increase the memory, there you need to decrease the memory. Based on our ML models, we have identified that, okay, these are the number of replica which you have configured, but you need to increase more because of your workloads are spiking at this particular time, right? Or you need to scale down your number of replica because their overall utilization is very low, right? Similarly, we also look for your resources which are configured, but no one is really using it, right? And that happens quite a lot on your dev environment or test environment. People try out things, they forget to clean up the environment, etc., right? And the third one is an ops agent, which basically takes care of day-to-day operations, right? And that is basically all the feedbacks which we got from discussing with people in terms of they have a challenge in terms of security. Then a lot of time they face challenges in terms of cluster upgrades, like where the upgrades will fail, where what certain scenarios where they forgot to look into during the upgrade process, right? Or the general Kubernetes best practices, right, from a compliance perspective, right? So these are the three areas which Nudgebee tries to focus on. So we normally say ourselves as a Nudgebee is a day two operations platform. Day one is when your application is built, you have deployed it. Day two is when you start monitoring your application, right? Looking into like any kind of challenges happening, any kind of cost-related things you need to fix into. So all of that goes into day two operations platform. Next slide, please. Okay, so this we probably covered automatically that, okay, Nudgebee basically comes with a three different kind of agent. When we say agent here, it's a like set of multiple agent within these categories, right? There's a troubleshooting agent, there's a optimization agent, and then there is a day two operations agent. And all of them basically target very specific scenarios. For example, they target troubleshooting, they target optimization, they target like upgrade specific things. They can also tell you like, okay, if you have a Postgres query, you want to optimize what all things, how you can rewrite your query, or do you need to create a new index into your table so that your query is more responsive, right? They also check for continuously logs. If they find any exception and you have a GitHub integration available, they can raise a pull request against that saying that, okay, this is the fix which you need to apply for mitigating this particular error or exception, right? Then we have our own SLM model, which we normally use for our day-to-day operation, which is based on Llama 70B and Microsoft Phi. They do a very different operations. We use Llama for doing a summarization and deciding what next we need to do, right? And then we use Phi to decide on like how to convert a particular task into a executable command, which we can execute, get a response, and then again pass it to Llama to decide next step, which we need to do, right? So these are the two different models which Nudgebee uses for general AI or LLM kind of integration. Third one is like, okay, whenever there is a new recommendation, either you can ask Nudgebee agents to perform those, or you can, once you test the system enough, right? So what we have realized in general is you don't want to basically deploy some shiny AI tool and then start testing it on a day one, right? You always want to have some person who is controlling that complete process, right? And then over the time, you basically build that trust, and then you can start asking AI agent to basically go ahead and do the operations, right? But you initially need that trust that, okay, whatever the suggestions coming in, they are basically valid for you. Maybe Nudgebee can give you a recommendation based on very local data, right? It identified an exception in the log and tells you that, okay, this is how you fix it, right? But normally you are the expert to understand is it a valid scenario? Do you need to fix at that place, or do you need to fix at let's say some other class so that doesn't happen again, right? So that is basically because we have an understanding of very specific local issue, right? Versus you having an understanding of a complete global architecture and everything, right? So we always want a human in the loop where they start trusting the system. You raise a pull request, and then someone in the expert team can review it, merge it, and then go ahead with that, right? Rather than automatically merging a pull request, deploying it. We are not really at that stage. Probably maybe after 1 year we can start doing that. But right now it is more like we still need a human in the loop to basically do the approval process and all. Right, next slide please. Okay, so this is how Nudgebee's agent flow normally looks like. You ask any question to Nudgebee, right? So you can trigger Nudgebee AI agents into multiple ways. You can ask a question on Slack, it will start responding to it. It normally starts responding based on any kind of Kubernetes event or Prometheus event or the error or exceptions which we are looking into. It basically starts planning that and then start executing that. Or you can come to Nudgebee's UI and then again ask a chat-based question, right? So these are the different levers where you can trigger the process. They follow the similar path altogether. You ask a question, there is a planner which basically decides what it needs to do, right? Once the planner decides the set of steps, it delegates those steps to individual agents that, okay, let's say there is an out-of-memory issue, and as a planner, I decided that, or as a normal, right, what I will normally do is like, okay, out-of-memory happened, now go and check for Prometheus, what was the memory utilization at that time. Go and check for logs that, okay, if there is any exception. Go and check for traces to identify which API calls were there, right? So in Nudgebee's term, this becomes a 3-step process where planner decide, okay, these are the 3 steps I want to do. Then it delegates each to a matrix agent, logs agent, and a traces agent. They basically understand a human language. They convert that into a relevant query, execute that, get the response, and return it to planner. Now planner again analyzes all of that and then decides the next step. Is it found the response of the question which it had initially asked? If yes, then it will return it to you that, okay, this is the reason why it has failed. Or again, it will plan a next step that, okay, based on this data, I want to look into these 2 additional data points. So these are the plan for that, right? And then it start going. So this is a general loop which keeps happening and the system starts responding to that, right? Next step, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so I can't do the demo as of now because somehow this is not able to connect, but I can probably go with next slides. Okay, so this is a general integration which we do in terms of like connecting with different tools. So what we have also realized during building this, right? You need a lot of observability data to build this, right? But you can't go into organization and say that, okay, please remove all the stack which you have and then start with our own observability stack, right? So that is where we decided to integrate with whatever the organizations are using. So we normally try to integrate with their logging solution, their matrices solution, their traces solution, rather than pushing our own stack into them, right? And then provide a more observability plus layer on top of that, where agents are doing the analysis, agents are doing this, that, etc., right? Then there are like general connectors in terms of, okay, you can observe your database with Nudgebee. You can create directly ticket. You can send a notification and etc. from UI perspective, right? Okay. So another thing which Nudgebee does is it basically uses eBPF for a tracing purposes, right? So a lot of time when we are talking to people, they always have a challenge with traces because now you need to set up a new stack to identify, okay, what all different, where the API calls are happening, what kind of statuses it has, etc., right? And that normally requires some kind of code changes or build changes, right? So Nudgebee uses eBPF internally to automatically generate a traces for you that is basically at a network level and then give you trace visibility that, okay, this is where the traffic flow is happening, this is what the status code is, etc. So you have by default a tracing system available with Nudgebee rather than you having to do any kind of code changes, right? We also expose open telemetry endpoints. So if you have already open telemetry enabled, you can just connect to that with Nudgebee's endpoints and it will start consuming that data. Okay, I will probably skip these. So these are like different things which different agents do in terms of like, okay, there's a FinOps agent which can interact with like right sizing, rebalancing, cost optimization, etc., right? Okay, so, okay, if you, this is more like a just Kubernetes thing to understand Kubernetes networking and all. Now, I had more slides, but again, I can't share it. So anyway, so questions on this side because I can't give a live demo for that. Any question, any thought you guys might have in terms of like AI, ML, LLMs, etc.? Yes, please. Sorry?
Means you are training code repository.
We are not training on the code repositories, right? Nudgebee does two different things. One is it understands Helm charts, right? So anytime you ask Nudgebee to generate a recommendation, right, or want to apply a recommendation, it can, if it is integrated with your GitHub repo, it can raise a pull request against your GitHub repo. Second thing what it does is, it also scans for any kind of logs which are continuously appearing, right, and then checks for the stack traces which are appearing there. And then based on those stack traces, if you have a GitHub integration again available, it can basically match those stack traces with your code which is available in GitHub, and then generate a patch for that, okay, you can basically apply this code to fix this stack trace exception, right? So these are the two things which Nudgebee does.
So pull request on what changes, whether this is code change or anything else?
Two changes. One is if you are using a deployment, right, or CI/CD based Helm-based deploy, so then it basically raises a pull request against your Helm chart to basically change memory, CPU, replica,
so it will basically update the YAML files.
Update the YAML file, right?
So
that's your Helm chart.
Let's say if I want to make code fixes, let's say I have certain lines of Java code and I found some bugs.
That's the second aspect, right? Where Nudgebee scans your logs, identifies, okay, that, okay, this is the file where the error was, this is the line number, and this is the stack, right? Now we search based on that file and line number into your GitHub repo, pull that file, again ask LLMs to basically, this is the exception which was there, this is the code base, right? Now generate a patch for that, for this particular exception, right? And it basically generates a GitHub patch, and then again, this is a pull request against that your repo.
So you are not training Nudgebee with code
Not
base.
really, not. No.
So it just instantly identifies the bug, and based on that it make fixes and then create a pull request and then make human in the loop.
Right.
Design.
So they're like very good online models in terms of like, which are very specialized on coding, right? Because these are like standard coding problems, right? You don't really need a fine tuning on further on that, right? There's a like Llama's coding variation, there's a DeepSeek coding variation, right?
O3 as well.
They're like multiple, right? Yeah. So you can basically reutilize them rather than retraining them. What Nudgebee trains model on one is a planning phase where Nudgebee has given certain plans that, okay, if user is asking this kind of question or this kind of issue is happening, these are the steps you need to use to basically start initialize the data or start understanding the data, right? Or it trains them on a very Prometheus, Loki, Elasticsearch kind of thing, right? Because those are basically base observability setup, right? Where you want to query and always have accurate data points. So these are the two where Nudgebee basically does a fine tuning of the model. But for the general purposes, it just reuses your model as is.
So what kind of agentic AI framework you are using?
We have our own internal framework, right? We started with Llama, forgot the name, LangChain, right?
Yeah.
So we started with a LangChain, but right now we hardly have any code related to LangChain. It is primarily based on like our observation, doing code enhancement and also it is proprietary to Nudgebee.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. Sorry about the demo and all that. So I was planning to show some of the use cases, but that didn't work out. But anyways.
Hi, so Dinesh here from Genomics. So nowadays, right, so it's not only about Helm chart, right, to
Totally agree.
deploy to the Kubernetes, right? So we just use Helm chart as a framework, and we use GitOps or maybe, let's say, Argo CD or Flux CD,
Agree.
right, to pass on the values, right?
Uh-huh.
So does this Nudgebee also detect that kind of pattern or framework, or we need to define that kind of pattern, or we need to give that pattern to Nudgebee, and then Nudgebee will...
Right now, we only understand Helm chart, right?
Okay.
Even if you are, let's say, using any kind of tool like Argo CD or Flux, right? They are still on top of Helm chart, right? Where they detect the change in your environment and the Git which is committed, and then they try to do auto heal or then revert the changes, etc., right? But they still work on top of like Helm-based deployment, right? We don't understand currently where Kubernetes kind of deployment structure restricted only to Helm charts.
Okay. So can we define some framework around that so that Nudgebee can work on that particular PR or something?
Probably good idea where we can think about like how to basically incorporate these requirement. Right now you can define your own agent where you can basically go to Nudgebee UI, give it an instruction in terms of your requirement, right? And then define a tooling around it. So that you can do, but right now it is not possible, which basically think about it like running a eval loop kind of thing, right? Where you basically ask LLM a question, get a response from LLM. Based on the response you basically call internal tool, right? For example, you ask it to, can you generate a query for this, right? That is what you ask to a LLM. LLM generated a query. You basically execute that query. If the query is error, you again ask LLM that, okay, I have executed this query, this was the error, go and fix it. LM will again return you a response for that, right? Okay, this is a fixed query, now you go ahead and execute, right? So agent is more like an evaluation loop where you basically continuously follow this particular pattern to fix a particular problem, right? Or identify a root cause around it, right? Now, when we say Nudgebee is an AI agent, Nudgebee basically implements these patterns around the LLM, right? To basically solve very specific problems in a SRE and DevOps space, right? Now, coming to your question, we deploy LLMs in currently our AWS environment, which is Bedrock. That is where we have deployed these. So it's a combination of Bedrock plus SageMaker. Bedrock doesn't support fee-based models, so it only supports Llama-based models. So that is where we are hosting Llama, and SageMaker in a basically fee deployment, right? So these are the two environments which we are currently using.
So the integration will happen like with our cloud because the environment will hosted
So
in
the
our.
deployment normally the way works out, the way Nudgebee works, right?
Okay.
It stores data in a segregated manner. If you are using, let's say, Nudgebee SaaS environment or Nudgebee deploy or Nudgebee self-hosted one, right? Nudgebee doesn't pulls your data from the cluster, right? Your data remains within your cluster in terms of log, matrices, traces. Otherwise, it will become very costly for us, right? So that remains within you. The only time we collect the data is when there is an issue happens, right? Or you are doing a live query, then we basically pass it on. Otherwise, we basically issue happens, we collect the relevant data in terms of log, matrices, and traces, then pass it on to our agent to start analyzing, running those loops, getting the data, enhance it, and then give you a response that, okay, this is potentially the root cause. And to identify that root cause, we have basically come up with these 5 data points, which you can look into further.
So I would like to understand more on architecture standpoint. We'll connect later to understand more.
Architecture slide somewhere in the slide.
Yeah, but that wasn't clear. That was
I will
serving
be
my
outside,
purpose.
right?
Because
So, yeah.
for us, it's an organization and multiple accounts. So how
Totally
that
agree.
integration happens, because I
Yes.
cannot do it with every account. I have to have a single connectivity which will serve all my accounts connected to the parent one.
Okay, sure. We can basically sync outside, probably. Yeah, okay. Thanks everyone. Sorry for the slides and demo, but hope. Okay.
Thank you so much for the insightful session. I would like to call upon stage Mr. Anil Kumar Verma, CTO at Multi Commodity Exchange Clearing Corporation Limited to do the honors. Can we have a big round of applause?